Me and Goose are pretty experienced Terraria players with plenty of hours behind our backs. But despite that, we had never properly attempted to beat the game on the Everything seed before. For those of you that don't know, the Everything seed, also known as the Get Fixed Boy or Zenith seed, is a combination of every unique Terraria seed combined into one. This means you spawn in England, boulders, boogeymen, bees, bouncy boulders, holy smitings, famine, life crystal boulders. I think you get the idea. Quite clearly, this seed provides a very unique experience compared to regular Terraria, and even the other secret seeds, to be honest. So stick around as I detail our electrifying and perilous journey through the Everything seed. Our adventure began like any other, chopping trees, being attacked by said trees, and taking out our anger on the wildlife. You know, the usual. With our gathered wood, we made a home, and attempted to venture upwards in search of any kind of loot. However, the path was treacherous, ridden with explosives, slimes that do over half your health bar in damage, and blocks of chili marmite. Already feeling dejected, I decided to take a break by making some homes, before returning to scrounging for loot. The process was long and arduous, with only the dopamine from the occasional trinket keeping me going. In the midst of us accruing our pre-hard mode necessities, the Eye of Cthulhu decided that it wanted to take us on. Despite being underprepared with Northwood flares and boomerangs, we accepted its challenge. It didn't go well. Fast forward a bit, we resumed our endeavour, and now had actual armour before the Eye challenged us again. This time, we had more for survivability, but not so much for damage. We still had the same loadout for that. It looked as if the fight might play out similarly to last time, so my spirits weren't too high, but we were already in the thick of things now, no point in backing down. We actually made it to the second phase, which was definitely a step above dying spontaneously like last time. A pair of the Moonlord's legs and the grappling hook made an apparent difference in mobility, and we'd learned to use our magic merit to get out of a tight spot. And while my flare gun did negligible damage to the boss, it was surprisingly effective against the Servants of Cthulhu due to its piercing capabilities. After an 8-minute long boss fight, against the odds, we managed to defeat the Eye of Cthulhu. With our first boss out of the way, with our gear as it were, the bosses of this seed started to feel a lot less daunting. Not that I had much to go off of, as the Eye's notoriously not difficult, but regardless, for the first time in the playthrough I thought like this was going to be a fun journey. After finally adequately kitting ourselves out, we decided the next step was probably Skeletron. Now, you might be thinking, I wonder where they're going after Skeletron before the brain or eater. Well, to answer that question, you see, we're bad at the game, we're dog shit. Just kidding. While the last statement probably still holds some validity, the reason mostly stems from trauma. Last we remembered, fighting the Brain of Cthulhu was genuinely unfair. Like, a fucker could literally telefrag you. This has been patched since 1.4.4, but we were unaware of this information. So why didn't we try the Eater instead? I don't have to explain myself to you. So while our next target to defeat was Skeletron, we actually planned on doing the first phase of the brain beforehand. This was because the creepers in the first phase dropped tissue samples, which we could use in order to gain access to Hellstone and be better prepared for Skeletron. So while Goose prepared an arena for us to fight the brain in, I scampered off to the surface to try and locate the dungeon. Yeah, so the entire surface is corrupt. So it was obscenely difficult to traverse without one of these guys being all like,
I've given thee courtesy enough.
Needless to say, it took me an awfully long time to traverse the surface. If I wasn't expanding my little gremlin tunnel, then I was unloading several shells into the face of a levitating hunk of shit. But just when I'd finally found it, after what felt like, and may have been, hours of searching, it was actually the temple. You see, the dungeon spawns at the bottom of a living tree, and on the opposite side of the world to the temple, so ensued the journey to the other side of the world, where I did eventually locate the dungeon. Upon my first arrival, I noticed a locked chest that was within reach. This caused the neurons in my ape brain to fire and... Hey, what do you know? Anyway, I didn't want to have to trek all the way back to the dungeon every single time, so I sought to create NPC homes to place a pylon. Oh yeah, this area is corrupt, isn't it? Okay, I've come back with an ungodly amount of sunflowers, and this still isn't enough. Okay, I've come back with more sunflowers, and I've blown up the surrounding evil. Finally, the housing is suitable. I guess this counts as the cavern, and we already have one of those pylons. Okay, let me just move it up. Right, okay, yeah, I starved to death. I'm back. Let's finally move this up. And you don't sell pylons. Fuck this. By this point, Goose had watched about 9 episodes of One Piece, and had made quite the extravagant arena with backwalls and all, something which we would get full use out of by using it for about 3 minutes in a scuffed-brained Cthulhu fight. And regarding the pylon at the dungeon, Goose used literally any brain power and suggested that we make a mushroom biome. Which we did. And it worked. In any case, with enough Crimtane tissue samples to make a Deathbringer pickaxe, we got to work on mining Hellstone and making new equipment. Now was the time to actually prepare for Skeletron. We dug out an expansive arena adjacent to the dungeon, only to realise that summoning Skeletron with a dungeon all the way down there would end up being half the battle. Luckily, I had a trick up my sleeve involving a little something called hoiks. Say what you want, but the devs confirmed it's a feature. If you don't know what a hoik is, neither do I, but let's do funny shit like this. Is it magic? Maybe. An illusion? You decide. My nifty trick worked like a charm, and we were able to defeat Skeletron without too much trouble with the old circling maneuver. The dark casters from the second phase and other random enemies proved to be troublesome though, so Goose would take aggro from Skeletron while I dispatched them with my Knight's Edge that I may or may not should have by this point. Next, got key, found woman, got funky key and shield, didn't use said funky key because Goose found 2 helling bows straight away, and then did a spot of fishing. Like, a lot of fishing. I don't really know what motivated us to do as much fishing as we did. I think it was for buffs and wormhole potions. Doesn't explain why I was doing quest fish though. Maybe I just wanted cool gizmos and gadgets, but who's to say? Next up was everyone's favourite swift slab of steak, the Wall of Flesh. But what about King Slime? Or Queen Bee? You haven't done either the brain or the eater yet? Fuck you. We'll get around to them later. Probably. Our preparations began by flattening out the land, destroying the relics of ancient civilizations to form a path forward, and playing an extremely scuffed rendition of the Final Fantasy Victory fanfare. I guess. It was a bit early for us to be celebrating though, because our first attempt at the boss was also extremely scuffed. with us forgetting to bring water walking potions, meaning we had to grapple over the lava instead of attacking, eventually leading to a failed attempt. But this could have been prevented if we'd destroyed more homes of the innocent. They convinced me not to though, with the promise of a cup of tea and plain toast later, so instead I expanded the bridge westwards. In subsequent attempts, the length of the bridge was not a problem anymore, only our own ineptitude. We came frustratingly close multiple times, but we were no match for the 120 damage fireballs that the fire imps threw up. Because we're tacticians, and not because we ran out of water walking potions, we decided to devise a new plan, a more defensive plan. It just so happens that the certain two bosses dropped strong defensive items. That's right, we're finally fighting the Eater in the Brain now. I hope you're happy. Neither of the bosses were any match for the big spinny fire-infused sword, and thus the two accessories were acquired. After some reforging, it was time to really show the Wall of Flesh what for. After some fishing, of course. On to our next attempt. Our master plan was rather effective, with the early lasers doing a measly 1 damage. The imp still packed a hefty punch, but this was still a lot more manageable than before. I don't know if the extra defense really put in that much work, but we had a pretty comfortable amount of health throughout the entire fight, so it easily could have. In any case, the Wall of Flesh had been reduced to spaghetti and meatballs. Without the spaghetti. So, meatballs. From the treasure bag, I unpacked a summoner emblem, and you know what that means. I was now contractually obligated to play a summoner build for the rest of the playthrough, and there was nothing I could do about it. So, I spent the next 15 minutes grinding out spider fangs, while Goose did that thing that every other class does at the start of hard mode. Like a loser. Look at this blockhead, this numpty, this nincompoop, mining his silly rocks like the caveman he is. I pity him really. Anyway, hard mode was probably going to be particularly grindy, so we decided to make a mob farm to try and ease that process. After blowing up half the planet, filling in this entire area with walls and whatnot, it just so happened that this was considered the surface. So no underground enemies and no chaos elementals, which weren't the primary reason we made the farm or anything. So I fucking did it again. In the caverns. Which, in retrospect, could be easily identified like it's a whole area that looks like caverns and has cavern stuff. But look, I don't want to talk about it anymore, moving on. So I worked on the second one, fought King Slime along the way so you can crush that one off the list. Finished the farm, it worked, that was cool. Killed Queen Bee too, hey look, that's all the pre-hard mode bosses, if the Eclipse wasn't a pre-hard mode boss. After all that hard work, it was time to fully utilize the farm. So we went fishing, and a jolly good fish it was. I also got a bit of Discord, but that's neither here nor there at this point. With not much else to do, I decided to expand the Skeletron arena in preparation of the mech bosses. This proved to be problematic. So, to tackle this issue, we did as any wise person would, and filled in the entire gargantuan arena with walls to prevent them from spawning. It sounds grueling, and it wasn't exactly thrilling, I will admit, but it was 45 minutes well spent given how much of a headache this saved us. For example, our first use case, fishing. Okay, just hear me out. My favourite summoner weapon, and a really good summoner weapon at that, is dropped by the Dread Nautilus mini-boss, which we have to fish up during a blood moon. So it was particularly helpful to not have to deal with hordes of enemies, both while we fished and fought the fiend. Not that it really mattered for me though, because I would get hit once and boom, half my health gone. Ah, don't kill me, you're so sexy, please. Ah. Despite me dying twice, Goose had been lifting at the gym the day before so that he could hard carry my ass and take home a sanguine staff. Joyous day. To celebrate our victory, capturing of marine life. If we just gloss over the next 2 hours, it was now time to try and fight our first mech boss in our expansive arena. Which boss did we choose to start with? Well, let me show you. Yeah, so you don't get the choice. We have to fight them all at once in the form of this abomination, Medusa. So yeah, our first attempt didn't go so hot, as this was our first proper exposure to the boss and its shenanigans. The destroyer felt like the most problematic part of the fight, with its lengthy dumpy slammed down at every part of the arena at any given time. And so, we sought to scheme the most efficient method to massacre this mechanical menace. Introducing the Drippler Crippler. The destroyer has a pretty well-known weakness, being how their body clamps up when they first spawn, meaning they are particularly susceptible to piercing weapons, such as flails. If we could chunkabait the destroyer during this period, we could kill it instantly, or at the very least, lower its health significantly. So enter more fishing. I'll spare you the details. We just killed a bunch of bloodios until we got the weapon. We also got those permanent buffs from the shimmer, because those are a thing that exist now. After that, we just got straight back to fighting the thing. Goose led with the Drippler Crippler, taking the destroyer from 100 to 50 in a matter of seconds. This allowed us to deal with them much quicker, and we were able to move on to fighting the twins in Skeletron Prime. Considering the fight was likely to take some time yet, we decided to focus on Skeletron Prime's most dangerous arms first, essentially making him a non-threat. We started with the laser arm, by having me command my colony of bats to target it. Next was the vice grip, then the Soren cannon. We were able to maneuver around the boss by just going in circles for the most part, as the eyes were bound to Skeletron Prime, although they could briefly escape during the dash sequences, which proved to be a cause of death for me. All was well though, because again, Goose is ripped out of his mind. With all the arms defeated, we could now focus on the twins. It wasn't optimal, but we ended up fighting the both of them in their second phase. We didn't have much of a strategy at this point, it just kind of felt like fighting the twins. And they died pretty soon after one another. That left only Skeletron, and, well, suffice to say, they weren't capable of doing much. You almost feel bad for them, like, they just kind of float around as they accept their fate. But alas, none shall be spared, and Medusa has been defeated. I'll be honest and say this felt more like a fluke than anything. But a win is a win, and we take those. There was still plenty to be done before Plantera, but I still started off by blowing a great big hole in the jungle and placing some platforms for an arena while I waited for life fruit to grow. I gathered what little had then grown, and then we fought horrors beyond comprehension in order to get Goose the Death Sickle. What was weird about this event though, is that last time I checked, I was easily able to comprehend all the horrors. So I finished off gathering life fruit, got Goose a lot of Discord, bought 50 copies of My Son, got some more of those permanent buffs, and then... with that, we decided to finish the arena for Plantera and give it our first shot. As with a lot of our first boss attempts, it sucked. I was stupid, the bouncy spiky balls weren't exactly helpful, and I was double stupid. But in all seriousness, there simply wasn't enough room to work with, and it was extremely easy to get cornered by Plantera. And so, for our subsequent attempt, I expanded the arena significantly upwards, and Goose suggested that we leave the bottom platform open, so that those pesky pink bricks don't bounce back up into the arena. Take 2. This time I didn't jump into the hooks twice, and I planned to remove the pink walls to look like a charm. So the first phase was just a minute of this. phase 2 time again. We could actually move around the boss this time, which was an improvement to say the least. Plantera also summons these vines across the arena and for the worthy, but damage isn't that bad. In addition, the accessories I used favour defense over damage. Why? It's a skill issue. Also, playing in multiplayer with someone on the other side of the planet increases the ping a little bit, but you know, that's unimportant really. I should just be better at the game. So anyway, Plantera. They died. Not much else to say on that. Lots of upgrades and goodies to be gotten from the dungeon now. So I grabbed the ice cube that we got from one of the farms and made my way over. Over the next 40 minutes, we gathered a pair of tabis and blackbirds, a new whip, the Frost Hydra staff, a paladin's hammer, 2 paladin's shields, and a load of ectoplasm. Why rail ectoplasm? Because I needed it to craft the Pumpkin Moon Medallion, in which there are plenty of summoner upgrades to be obtained, particularly the Spooky Armor and Necromantic Scroll in my case. Before that though, more horrors beyond comprehension to get Goose the Terrorblade. Also picked up this new toy which was better than the Sanguine stuff, I guess. Although I will say, the horrors really started to make sense. When I went to go craft some pumpkin medallions, there were no pumpkins left. I guess someone used them for something, but who couldn't really say. In any case, I had to plant more and wait for them to grow. In the meantime, we went to the temple to locate the boss room for the next boss, Golem, and set up the arena for later. Now, I don't think it was actually that bad in post, but at the time I was having a really hard time seeing anything, even with all the torchlight, so I spent an unwise amount of time just kind of scraping away at the paint. After said unwise amount of time, the pumpkins had finally grown, so we started the first Pumpkin Moon event. Got the Necromantic Scroll first time, but I was going to need a lot more spooky wood than this. So we did it a second time. You'd never guessed, but that still didn't leave me with enough spooky wood. Third time's the charm, is what I would say. But I was still 60 spooky wood shy because Goose accidentally trashed all the spooky wood he gathered. On to the 4! Just kidding. Made the spooky set finally, and then quickly farmed for the Crimson Key to get the Vampire Knives for use because we're optimal players who play around optimal damage. At this point, we were basically ready for Golem, so we chugged 20 red potions before descending into the arena with pretty much every buff in the game. And once we started the fight, the most awesome, most amazing, most incredible and interesting gimmick made itself visible. Or I guess, not visible. In addition to being tiny, Golem now makes it so you cannot see. And with Goose having aggro priority, all I could really do was dash back and forth, hoping not to get hit. And I mean, it worked for the most part. This jungle mimic decided to appear mid-fight and make things a bit harder. But I still got back in there and we defeated Golem first try. I can't really describe why, but this victory just kind of felt hollow. We beat them fair and square, yet it really felt like we didn't. Anyway, we beat them a dozen more times in typical Golem fashion, so that we could get a pixel. And then I moved straight onto trying to collect prismatic lacewings. I hate to disappoint, but we weren't going to be doing the Empress of Light in daytime. That thing's a nightmare in multiplayer as it is. What we were really after was the Soaring Insignia, because infinite flight. And the Kaleidoscope because, well, it's just a better whip. To fight the Empress as a summoner, I was going to need a summon that was faster and more precise than my current one, such as the Xenostaff, dropped from the Martian sources during a Martian invasion. So it gets invaded by the Martians we did, and when it eventually came to the sources, their gleeby DBRs didn't want to leave the ceiling, until they would eventually despawn. Wondrous and exciting gameplay. Towards the end of the event, Goose realised that we could still have them spawn and be able to fight them in our first mob farm. But it was too late by that point, and the one sorcerer we did kill dropped a ranged weapon. I had given up on the Xenostaff at this point. It didn't feel worth it anymore, given how long I was going to use it, and the fact there was a much stronger couple of weapons right around the corner from the Stardust Pillar. So we killed the cultists, nothing too remarkable there. And then it was time to defeat our class's respective pillars. For the Stardust pillar, I learned a lesson in mitosis before a star cell was sick of my shit and dealt 548 damage. Once I had killed 100 star cells, I tried to take a sneaky approach from below to attack the main pillar. It didn't really work, but nonetheless, we brute forced our way through, and I crafted the Stardust Dragon Staff, which ended up being a very valuable asset in assisting Goose with defeating the Solar Pillar. With lunar event weapons obtained, we could return focus to the Empress of Light. Goose informed me that the Stardust Cell Staff might actually be a better choice for the Empress, given that it's more precise than the Dragon, and the Empress moves around a lot. Because there isn't a proper day-night cycle in the Everything Seed, we weren't certain as to where or when we were supposed to fight the Empress, such that she wouldn't enrage. The wiki stated that she would not enrage if fought below the surface. But was this the surface? Or was this the surface? Only one way to find out, right? Okay, yeah, this was the surface. The only other large arena we had was the Plantera arena, but it was lacking a horizontal space. Still, we were lazy sons of guns and we gave it a shot in there anyway. With the Empress locked onto Goose, it was impossible to do much damage to them myself, especially while being subjected to all the crossfire. Eventually though, Goose croaked and now it was my time to shine. I had practiced the Empress of Light a lot back in the day to defeat their daytime version, so their attack patterns had become like second nature to me, and I was able to hold out for the full minute until Goose came back, despite constantly running out of horizontal rim and being cornered. Right as we were about to land the finishing blow, the jungle mimic from earlier had returned, and they were pissed. In a last-ditch effort, they utterly gored Goose, tearing him apart limb from limb, until all that was left of his body was a bloody pile of tissue. But that was not enough to stop the destruction I would deliver. In the name of vengeance, I struck down the Empress of Light with impunity before unleashing a war cry with my whip held high, and a single tear rolling down my face. I could not forgive the jungle mimic for what they had done, and after a legendary clash, the foul beast was slain, centuries of atrocities avenged. Didn't get the kaleidoscope, so we expanded the arena to make subsequent attempts easier, and fought it a fuck-ton more until I eventually got it. This should not have taken 10 treasure bags, but here we are. Now that I was finally kitted up, we could start thinking about the Moon Lord, the final boss of our journey. Now, the way I've always fought the Moon Lord is with a huge sky bridge that spans at least half the entire world. But that method might have proven difficult given how high up the actual surface was, leaving little room for flight, and also presenting the risk of leaving orbit. But there was also the risk of moon boulders. That's right, moon boulders. Whenever the Moon Lord finishes using a phantasmal death ray attack, he just kind of spurts out several dozens of bouncy boulders. For that reason, it would also be ideal to not be too close to solid ground at any time. We ended up removing the roof on the Skeletron arena, and expanded it horizontally by about twice its length. There was a bit of land that had to be demolished to do that. I spent 20 plat on dynamite and got to work with haste, but the job was over much sooner than I expected. While I was still slightly skeptical that the arena would suffice, we decided there wasn't much harm in just giving the boss a go, and so we cleared out the last 2 pillars, after many deaths, and began our first attempt at the Moon Lord. Now, I don't mean to downplay the final boss, but this fight was just tragic. The first thing we noticed when it spawns in is that we can't see it behind our behemoth of a dirt wall. That definitely made attacking and dodging the boss a lot harder, but to top it all off, Goose being the tank and all, it exclusively targeted him, so it would just run off no matter how hard I tried to catch up. And if I did catch up, I would just get caught in the crossfire and take a lot of damage or just outright die. I'm pretty sure that for more than half of the fight, the boss was not on my screen. Not to say that I didn't contribute at all, but it was pretty hard for me to do so. I would get hit once, recall back to the nurse because I might as well, teleport back, get hit once again, recall back, and so on. This did eventually culminate in the defeat of the Moonlord on our first attempt, because Goose was a beefy motherfucker. I can't say I felt all too satisfied with our victory, but I mean, we did it all within the rules of a multiplayer setting, with no cheated in buffs or quality of life mods. And so, with that, we had conquered the Everything Seed.